What is the most compelling counter-argument to something that you strongly believe? I strongly believe in democracy and that everyone should have some real political influence. However, like someone said, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter, and so I also think that a majority of people believe some pretty silly things and just don't look at issues candidates in a rational way. Edit. I had previously quoted Winston Churchill, but a few commenters below note there doesn't seem to be any evidence he actually said this. I believe there is no such thing as objectively bad taste in music. Best counter argument, Brockenside. I think smoking weed should be legal, but more teens will smoke. Teenagers who smoke marijuana daily are over 60% less likely to complete high school than those who never use. They're also 60% less likely to graduate college and 7 times more likely to attempt suicide. Source. Another source. Marijuana may hurt the developing teen brain. Regular cannabis use during the teenage and young adult years is associated with poorer cognitive function, verbal memory, processing speed, cognitive inhibition, sustained attention. Krista Lisdell, director of the Brain Imaging and Neuropsychology Lab at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. Source. Heavy marijuana use causes poor memory and abnormal brain structure. Source. Marijuana use is associated with impaired sleep quality. Source. Cannabis during pregnancy endangers fetal brain development. Study shows that consumption of cannabis during pregnancy can derail how nerve cells form connections, potentially limiting the amount of information the affected brain can process, and with long-lasting effects after birth. Source. Smoking cannabis can shrink the size and shape of sperm. Source. The largest study of the effects of the main ingredient of cannabis has shown definitively that it can cause short-term paranoia. The Oxford-led research also, for the first time, identifies psychological factors that can lead to feelings of paranoia in people who take cannabis. Source. Marijuana has some addictive qualities. Study finds that 40% of those in an outpatient treatment program for pot use exhibited withdrawal symptoms, so a hallmark of drug dependence. Source. Smoking cannabis doesn't make you more creative. Cannabis with a high concentration of THC does not improve creativity. Smokers who ingested a low dose of THC, or none at all, they were given a placebo, performed best in the thinking tasks that the test candidates had to carry out. Source. I believe in democracy but really hate the fact that so many stupid duckers out there have just as much say in how the country is run as I have. How about an entrance exam to show that you at least understand the issues? Edit. Thanks for the gold, stranger. Does this mean I have to vote for you in future? Edit 2. Has. More than have. Trust Reddit to improve one's grammar. I strongly believe the United States should establish a universal healthcare system based on the British, German, or Canadian model. Long term, this would severely reduce costs and significantly improve quality of care for all but the wealthiest Americans. But I recognize that doing this would likely drive the US government greatly into debt in the short term because it'd necessitate massive tax hikes that most Americans would be unwilling to accept. Edit. Edited to address legitimate semantic issues raised by responders. Edit 2. Wow. Thank you very much for the gold. Much obliged. I'm a strong advocate against gun control, and I suppose the best argument that I can't really debate against is the fact that school shootings would happen less. Good question, OP. I'll actually upvote you. Edit. Jesus H. Christ, I made both the anti-gunners and the pro-gunners dislike me. I strongly believe that there is good in everyone. The compelling counter-argument is all the hate, murder, injustice, rape, etc. that exists in our world. I believe that affirmative action is inherently racist and aggravates racial tensions. I think all applications for colleges should withhold the name, race, and gender of the applicant, and financial aid should be considered separately. The counter-argument being that even with a blind system, statistics indicate that bias would still enter the system in some form and make it harder for black people to get into college. Also, some college essays, the applicant would find it useful to discuss hardships they faced as a member of a minority. Edit. I'm looking back on this comment a few months later and I want to make something clear. I'm very grateful for the discussions I've had with other users on this subject. It was good, I feel. to get some other perspectives on a subject that I'd only relied on my own personal experience to develop an opinion for. So if this was our change of view, you'd all get deltas. As it stands, I want to say that after reconsidering my thoughts and those of others, I think that affirmative action is the hero we need at the moment, but not the hero we deserve. Hopefully one day we can develop a perfect system for distributing aid and considering acceptance into college. But for now, this is the one we have to work with. This is by far one of the best and most well-written threads I have ever seen on Reddit. Good job. I think there are intelligent species that live elsewhere in the universe, but there's that whole Fermi paradox thing. From Wikipedia, the Fermi paradox is the apparent contradiction between high estimates of the probability of the existence of extraterrestrial civilization and humanity's lack of contact with, or evidence for, such civilizations. The basic points of the argument, made by physicists Enrico Fermi and Michael H. Hart, are: the sun is a typical star, and relatively young. There are billions of stars in the galaxy that are billions of years older. Almost surely, some of these stars will have Earth-like planets, assuming the Earth is typical. Some of these planets may develop intelligent life. Some of these civilizations may develop interstellar travel, a technology Earth is investigating even now, such as the 100-year starship. Even at the slow pace of currently envisioned interstellar travel, the galaxy can be completely colonized in a few tens of millions of years. According to this line of thinking, the Earth should already have been colonized, or at least visited, but no convincing evidence of this exists. Furthermore, no confirmed signs of intelligence, see empirical resolution attempts, elsewhere have yet been spotted in our galaxy or, to the extent it would be detectable, elsewhere in the observable universe. Hence Fermi's question, where is everybody? I believe that copyright terms should be much shorter, about 10-20 years. The counter-argument is that if you create something you own it. I firmly believe abortion should be legal, but I would kind of feel bad about it considering it really is a living person, although I feel less bad because it would ruin my life to have a baby right now. I am firmly of the opinion that astrology is BS, and it really annoys me that I am a typical Cancerian. I regularly eat meat and defend meat eating, but I think there is something to the moral argument against it. We can almost universally agree that it is wrong to torture or mistreat animals, but most, myself included, have no issue eating a burger. If we realize that there is some moral status granted to an abused animal, it seems reasonable that we should attach some moral status to the animal that we choose to kill for our own gustatorial pleasure. But, bacon. Side note, this thread and everyone's discussion reminds me of Monty Python's I'd Like One argument. Please, skit. I believe in euthanasia, but legalizing could create a social pressure that when you're old and sick you should die to stop being a burden, which is a horrible thing to even think about. I had to deal with something like that when my dog got old and people would say things like it's cruel to keep a dog alive that long. Big open source fanboy here. Companies can maintain a codebase better and can actually do background checks that no foreign domestic spy gets their defective on purpose code in. I firmly believe that people are generally good, but then there are the people behind YouTube comments. I strongly believe in taxing the super rich, in order to minimize the gap between rich and poor. However, the strongest argument against this, in my opinion, is that big businesses will move elsewhere in order to avoid tax, or have to fire people in order to reduce expenditure, and either way people will lose jobs. It makes me really uncomfortable when I see young children playing with iPads, iPhones, computers etc. At family gatherings often they are just given the technology so they will be quiet. It gets them to stop running around, wanting to go outside and play, basically be a kid. I've seen other young kids who are not allowed to play with technology be so invigorated and focused on the iPad that their cousin or friend is using. It's scary. I would want my kid to go outside and get filthy, to run around, to read books and play with Lego. But at the same time I use technology myself all day long and believe that adapting to it is important. I also wouldn't want my kid to be socially ignored for not having access to technology. I am an atheist, but growing up I remember hearing this argument for a higher being from C.S. Lewis, not verbatim. We thirst and there exists water to satisfy that thirst. We hunger and there exists food. We have sexual urges, a need to breath, etc. Across every culture these things have always existed. Similarly, people have always longed for a higher power to worship. People in other parts of the world who have no knowledge of one another. If there were no God, it would be the one impulse that all of humanity has shared for which there is nothing to satiate it. So many of the world's problems would be resolved if the current human population was greatly reduced, but no one, inherently, deserves not to live. I believe in gender-neutral marriage law, and would love to hear stronger non-religious counter-arguments than heterosexuals will stop getting married, people will stop reproducing, or it will lead to people marrying pigs. I'm a wholehearted Christian, but I once heard that I'll never believe in a God that banished someone from paradise for having a desire for knowledge. Talking about Adam and Eve eating from the tree of knowledge hit me hard. I support the burqa ban in principle, but in practice, we see what actually happens is that if women can't leave the house with them on, they just don't leave the house. As a doctor, I firmly believe that the many years of studying and the knowledge I acquired makes me the only person competent enough to make treatment decisions for my patients. However, autonomy is a human right, and no matter how ignorant you are, it's still your body and you should decide what is to be done for it. I'm for capital punishment, and the best argument against that is when inmates who were not guilty of a crime get executed. This has indeed happened and it is pretty hard to debate against. Though this is generally not the case considering there is usually overwhelming evidence, but I definitely see and understand the concern. I believe people are inherently good, but then they go and do something nitty. I believe in life after love, but I can feel something inside me saying I really don't think you're strong enough. Many people, mostly adults, say watching people play games online, streamers and YouTube, is stupid, and why don't we just play the games ourselves? Counter argument: sports. I believe no one deserves to be killed under any circumstances. The best counter argument to this is that if someone strips so many people of their lives, why should he still be granted that right? I'm generally in favor of liberal libertarian economic policies, such as slashing taxes, public spending and deregulating markets. Having said that, I realize that inequality inevitably increases through these conditions, and I don't really have a good argument against that point. I'm very anti-establishment and believe that free market capitalism as a system promotes the absolute worst elements of humanity and is one of the biggest causes of suffering in the world. Yet it's also taken us to the point where I can tell thousands of people what I think about it by clicking some plastic while I sip coffee made from beans that were harvested 3,000 miles away and watch a sporting event that's currently taking place in Denver from my front room in Glasgow. Go Broncos. Basically, it's the best and worst thing to happen to humanity. And if you ask me for a better system, I can't give you an answer, which is infuriating. Edit. Wow. Thanks a bunch for the gold. Didn't expect that. I'm a strong believer in secularism and I want laws not to have any religious consideration, and where all citizens obey the same set of laws. But coming from a country which is 80% Catholic, 5% Islamic, 12% Protestant, and a 2% bloc voting Unitarian sect, where most civil laws here are heavily influenced by religious norms and where Muslims are covered by a different set of family laws, I feel secularism is a losing cause in my country. Oddly enough, the greatest argument I recognize against secularist non-discriminating laws is that each person should be given the right to be ruled by a set of laws of his or her choosing. If my country suddenly implements different sets of laws for different beliefs, like how it was in the former Ottoman Empire with its system of milads or confessional communities, then I'll gladly accept it, as long as there will be a non-religious millet community which laws would afford me and my secularist fellows the greatest civil and social liberties. I am particularly proud of Reddit users right now. I came expecting garbage, but found very thought-provoking responses, despite there being no serious tag. Kudos. I strongly believe that an independent central bank is a necessity in any modern society. A good counter-argument would be to say that decisions that have such a massive effect on our economy should be subject to some type of checks and balances. The Fed's power could result in an abuse and or mismanagement of the institution if the wrong person was made chairman. I'm a libertarian. I believe people should be free to decide what's best for themselves. Then I'll leave my house and deal with you dumb methodicas. I mean, I still believe in freedom. But I get it. I'm a firm believer in tighter gun control in the US. I also know that it's virtually impossible to legislate any effective control at this point. There are so many guns out there that any new legislation isn't going to do a whole lot of good. The only way you would really control guns in the US at this point is if you imposed martial law. Started out by going into everybody's home and taking all the guns, then tightly controlling who got any new guns that were produced. I don't like to look down on the books other people read. So many out there today hate reading, so I feel like putting down someone for their book choices is almost demoralizing. I would rather have someone read something, even if it is not something I would read, rather than completely avoid books. Enter 50 Shades of Grey. I believe that hip hop is one of the truest art forms in society today. But then again, I read this one comment that said Kanye West, more like Gangage, which is beginning to sway me. I once strongly believed in free market libertarianism leaning a bit toward anarcho-capitalism. But lately I've found evidence from books like Capital in the 21st Century which asks, what's the point of economic prosperity if only a few actually benefit? This has caused me, by implication, to question my view of government and on ethics as well. I believe in equality of the genders. At the same time, I recognize that there are undeniable structural and chemical differences between the male and female brain. I believe that I should have the right to decide when to die, when I'm old and terminally ill. But giving me that right also forces the obligation to make that decision on millions of other people, including huge numbers whose families will pressure them to end their lives for financial reasons. I strongly believe when I'm drunk that I am always right. Best counter argument. Sober self. I am an atheist, but the central theme of the story Life of Pi goes something like this. You can choose a scary and unpleasant reality, or believe a comforting story. Me, I prefer scary and uncomfortable reality, but it's really easy to see why so many people believe the comforting story, especially if they have had a hard life. I'm somewhat of a liberal that believes the government should provide free healthcare, free birth control, public, free, universities, etc. Yet I'm aware of the fact that the more a government provides for you, the more power it has over you, which just does not sit well with me. I don't believe in organized religion because I think there is a complete lack of evidence. However, I believe in science, and most scientific claims, though I haven't actually seen the experiments in first person or gone through the data. Belief that America is dumb and backward because they don't use the metric system. Argument: there are two types of country in the world, those that have been to the moon and those that have not. Ethically motivated vegetarian here. Best argument that vegetarianism isn't natural for humans is that we have enzymes devoted specifically for digesting meat. This evolved trait indicates we are probably natural meat eaters. Could be a vestigial trait, but I doubt it. I'm a person with faith in a creator, which isn't a popular opinion on Reddit, and scientific facts are a constant challenge to my belief system. I've had to ultimately conclude that science is a study of the natural world, and faith is the study of the supernatural world. It's no worse than believing in fringe science and 9/11 conspiracy nonsense, and it's far better than believing anti-vaccination bullet. Bring on the haters. I believe strongly that people should be informed as possible and weigh that info within their hearts and minds. But I also know that in the information age, information itself becomes a weapon, a mode of manipulation and deflection and circular argument. Sometimes knowing more just muddied the water. The overall behavior of pharmaceutical companies does make it really hard sometimes to convincingly defend vaccines from the anti-vaccine crazies. Zwart Pete. is a normal tradition in the Netherlands that has nothing to do with racism. But I'm positive we're alone in this in the world's eyes. It's a conflict of symbolism. I look at Zwarte Piet and I don't see a racial stereotype. I see a holiday character, like Elves Santa for Christmas. I don't see why I have to accept other people's interpretation that it's an incredibly offensive racial stereotype. That sounds awful. Why would I do that? Why don't you guys take our interpretation and instead of trying to censor a negative symbol, we turn it into a positive symbol? I strongly believe that racism would disappear if we simply paid no mind to the ethnicity or origins of others. In other words, simply be blind to it like we are to eye or hair color. But I also understand that many aren't ready for such thought or action and it would cause harm if done at this time. I believe affirmative action is morally reprehensible, as it grants those of one race precedence over another. However, I realize that African Americans are at a clear disadvantage, and that affirmative action may be the only way to really solve that problem. Oh yeah? Well, duck you. I've never met a person that said that and thought they lost the argument. I am extremely pro-choice. I don't believe abortion is murder. I also don't believe it's my choice to decide what's right for every other female on the planet. However, the best counter-argument said to me, when I used to concern myself with politics, was, if abortion isn't murder, why is it that when a pregnant woman is murdered, it's considered a double homicide? I believe eggnog milkshakes should be available year-round, not just when it is convenient for McDonald's. There are plenty of times in the middle of July when I'm thinking, damn, I want an eggnog milkshake. Why? McDonald's. Why? A nation divided cannot stand. I think that we should change the way that we think about drugs and drug abuse. Instead of considering individuals who abuse drugs as criminals, we should take an approach similar to Portugal, where we treat addicts like patients that need help instead of criminals that need to be imprisoned, making treatment and rehabilitation a priority. The opposition to this is that drug use will go through the roof. But using Portugal as a case study, it most likely won't if the correct measures and treatment programs are taken. I believe in God. I have my whole life. I just graduated from college with my undergrad in Bible studies. I'm now preparing to start seminary, and the end goal is to someday become a pastor. However, I know full well that the existence of God cannot be proven, and a lot of people's personal beliefs are based on personal, unverifiable experience and faith. I just have no problem with this because I don't believe that faith in God has to be based on little facts. To me, science and religion cannot disagree because they are two entirely different ways of looking at the universe. Science seeks to answer how, religion seeks to answer why, and I'm okay with people not agreeing with my why. I personally cannot stand most Christian apologetics because they are trying to answer science with faith, and they are two totally different things. Most of it is cringe-worthy logic that, no matter how hard they try, begins with the same basis that there is a God. It's circular reasoning. I much prefer apologetics that discuss Christian morality and the historical accuracy of the Bible. Edit. To answer the question, I think the strongest evidence against God is how there is still suffering in the world if God is all-loving. There are many answers to this question, but it's a tough one every Christian has to grapple with. I changed my stance on the death penalty because I believe in the sanctity of life. You believe in the sanctity of one human life. You believe in them all. Gay rights and stuff. Nobody chooses to be gay. You're born that way. My friend once said he agrees, but it is an abnormality in the mind. Yes, you're born that way, but so are autistic children. So he's saying being gay isn't a choice, but it isn't normal. It's not a disease, but it is abnormal and we should approach it as such. Like, what causes people to be born gay? What causes people to be born autistic or a sociopath? And that actually makes a lot of sense to me. I strongly believe that religion is bullet. There's plenty of reasons as to why I believe that, and that's not what this post is about. So I won't talk about why most religions are crap. The one thing that makes me stop and think sometimes is the universe. My brain can't even comprehend the size and workings of the cosmos. Every time I contemplate it just gets more and more mind-blowing. How can something so utterly incomprehensible be simply random? Sometimes I wonder, could there be a higher power? Abortion is morally wrong. Yet I am pro-choice. I absolutely ducking love league, but goddamn is the community it. I'm cheating a little bit because I am not a creationist, but I think this is one of the best counter arguments of all time. During the Scopes monkey trial, a 1920s trial determining whether evolution is acceptable subject matter in public schools, Clarence Darrow argued with William Jennings Bryan. Like most people at the time, especially in the South, Bryan believed that the Bible should be understood literally as it is written. He believed in Genesis, the idea that God created the earth in 7 days. He cited a theologian who calculated that, in the biblical context, the earth is around 6,000 years old. Clarence Darrow responded by determining that a 24-hour day is measured by the rising and setting of the sun. For originally there was no sun. It is possible that Genesis-era days were not a standard 24 hours. It is therefore possible that God's 7 days were an indeterminate amount of time. Perhaps 25 hours, hundreds of years, or even millions and billions of years. This disproves that the factual basis for believing, as a matter of fact, that the earth is definitively 6,000 years old. It also implies that within this time, Darwinian evolution could have happened. TLDR, the earth is not definitely 6,000 years old, even in the context of Genesis, because the sun is necessary to determine 24 days. At one point, there was no sun. So God's 7 days could have been an indeterminate amount of time. Perhaps billions of years. Edit. Wording. The average economist is a moderate Democrat. So then what's my excuse for being so libertarian when so few of the experts aren't? I believe that racism is a horrible systematic and cultural problem, and that it's not fair or right to be prejudiced towards someone because of their ethnicity. However, I live in downtown Chicago, and the majority of gun violence and mugging in the area involves black men. I feel uncomfortable every time I'm walking alone and see a black male nearby, assuming he's a stranger. In more enclosed casual settings I get along with black people like any other, but on the streets, I put my guard up. I'd wager 99% of those I've passed pose no threat, but I can't help it. Statistically speaking, this city backs up stereotypes. This is one of the best threads I've read on Reddit. I won a speech against gay marriage using the statistics supporting that it is more dangerous to be a MSM, male who has sex with males, than straight. No use of religion or culture or any of that. Thesis: legalizing gay marriage may lead to a rise in AIDS. From the time I gave the debate to 2 years later, rate of AIDS among MSM had grown in states with newly legalized gay marriage about 14%. I was put on this side I didn't get to choose. Keep in mind I'm from the Bible Belt, but my thesis was supported by evidence since then. However, I got like 10 bonus points on my final for winning this. The easiest argument against it, lesbianism, which is as safe as or safer than being straight and in a traditional marriage. I didn't touch on this at all in the speech knowing it would be my downfall. Fortunately nobody was smart enough to notice this and use it against my argument.